Hello and thank you for coming to check this out. So this is our 13th After Effects reproduction in Apple Motion 5. The source graphic is from Aliyah Mikayilov, and if you want to check that out and compare what we're doing in our project with the original that we're trying to recreate, there's a link in the description and you'll see that graphic roll in at about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. So it's an interesting one this week. We've got our banner that's going to stretch and fly in and preview the main titles as the flourish top and bottom. And then when the banner reaches the end of its run, the main titles will slingshot out the other way. And there's this detail here that makes it seem as though they're being magnified as they run through this space. In the layers panel, there's lots happening. We've got our clone layer to animate everything out. And in the main graphic itself, lots of groups and lots of steps that we'll be doing. The font that I'm using for this is Unisans, and if that's not already in your system, there is a link in the description where you can go to a website and get access to free versions of that font. Before we start, if you want to set up the background the same as me, it's a gradient generator. It's on the diagonal. And these are the RGB settings if you want to do that. Okay, the other thing you will need to do though is set up some guides. So if you're not sure how to get access to your guides, you get them through your rulers. So you want to come into this menu and make sure rulers is on, and then you can check guides. To drag a guide out, click into the ruler space and drag it out, and then you can select it and get rid of it that way. There's a hotkey as well to toggle them on and off once you've got guides turned on. This hotkey here, you can toggle them to make them visible or not. Right, so you want to drag out a guide, one guide here to -300, one guide here to 400, and one guide here to 600. As you drag a guide out, you'll see the numbers come up to tell you where you are exactly. Alright, so once you're set up with your guides, I'll see you back here and we'll see how we put this all together. Our project is a 1920 by 1080. It's at 30 frames a second and it's 10 seconds long, but we're just using 8 seconds in the timeline. We'll do our banner first, so let's add a group and name it banner, and then I'm going to come and grab the line tool, and around about here I'm going to hold shift and drag from left to right to get quite a long line. And then I'll rename it as banner. Come into the inspector, into shape, and then into shape style. We want the width at 102. The start cap set to none and the end cap set to none. And then come into properties and just make sure the Y value is set to 0. And we want to open up shear and set the x-axis shear value to 8%. Right, and then we can turn our guides on. I'm using that hotkey. And just select the banner and we can just drag it into place. So you want the bottom left hand corner to hit this guide, and over here the top right hand corner to hit this guide. Okay, then we'll turn the guides off for now, and then I'm going to select the banner, come into the inspector, into the style section, make sure the playhead's at 0, set a keyframe for the last point offset. Drag that value down to 0%, then bring the playhead forward to 2 seconds, bring that last point offset value back up to 100%, and then in the keyframe editor, let's drag to selected, right click to set the interpolation to Bezier, then right click on these handles to break the tangents. I want the stretch to start really slow, so I'm going to drag this handle and holding shift I'm dragging it out this way, and then I want it to jump forward after that, so I'm going to drag this top handle and drag it this way. So we should get a slow start, then a bit of a jump forward before it comes to rest. Right, that's looking alright. So now we want to animate the first point offset to follow behind it. First I'm going to drag to select this curve and right click to copy it. I'm going to bring my playhead to 10 frames, and I'm going to click on the first point offset there, right click and choose Show in Keyframe Editor. I'll select it in there and set a keyframe, and then I'm going to Command V to paste the curve on there. Then I'll change this menu back to animated. There's cleaner ways of doing that, but it's about the same number of steps to get both curves presented down here. So that's what we have now. Alright, bring the playhead to 2 seconds, and you see the first point offset keyframe node here, that's represented by this one in the timeline. So click on that and pull it back. Then come and grab the first point offset value, set that to 99. So let's see what we have. Okay, now along the path of our banner, I want to make sure that we get a long enough stretch for the main titles to be previewed. Okay, I think that's looking alright. So the next step is to create a bookend. So we're going to grab this banner and Command D to duplicate it, and I'm going to rename it as bookend. I just don't know any better word to describe this element, so I call it bookend. Come into the inspector and reset the offsets, but then select the first point offset and set that back to 99%. Then move the playhead to about 20 seconds and come and grab the bookend, come into properties, turn your guides back on, and just shift the X position of this one to sit against the guide at the 400 mark. Okay, so now bring the playhead back to, you want to find the frame just before. So for me, I'm on frame 107, so the frame just before the first point offset passes it by. So right about here, I'm going to go the frame before it, actually, right here. So for me it's at 106, for you it might be a little bit different. But just make sure it's sitting within this part of the flying banner, and make sure it's selected, and then hit I on your keyboard to trim it. So now we don't see it until the banner has passed by. Right, let's turn off the guides and see what we have. Good, so we have finished with the banner, and the next step then is to put our titles in there. But first, before we do that, we've got to do one more thing. Let's get prepared for those flourishes. Make a new group. Let's call this group flourishes. Select that banner, duplicate it, and drag that copy into the flourishes group, and I'll just rename that as flourish top for now, and we'll close that group and turn it off because we'll come back to that later. Okay then, so we can get busy with the titles. For our titles, let's add a new group. Call that group titles. And I'm going to come and grab the text tool and click into the canvas. And add the words your main titles. And I want the font size to be 78. And set the tracking to 8%. So I have this set at heavy italic caps. I'm going to click in and select the first two words and drop that down to regular italic, and I'll center the alignment. Then grab the playhead and move it until the banner is visible, and grab the titles and come and grab properties, and let's just by eye line them up so that they're sitting to the middle of that element there. Right, so that's our titles that we're going to use, but we're going to sort of use this group to make two other groups. So let's close this group for now and Command D to duplicate it and turn it off. Grab that duplicate. I'm going to rename this as the banner mask titles. Right, I'll open that group up. I'm going to bring my playhead to 20 frames and select the text copy in there and hit I on the keyboard to trim them to that point. Then I'm going to move the playhead to 25 frames. I'm going to move the X position to 550. So now they're right over on the other side. And with the playhead at 25 frames, set a keyframe there. Then bring the playhead to 1 second and 15 frames. And just drag their position so that the S has come past the bookend a little bit. Alright, and now we want to come and grab in the keyframe editor. Let's break the tangents on the handles, and I'm going to grab this handle here and pull it down like this, so our titles will, or this group of titles will run in and then settle. Alright, so now as it says, this is going to be a banner mask, so come and grab the banner in the banner group, right click it, add image mask, grab that title from the banner mask group and drag them in, and set the blend mode to subtract. Okay, good, so we can now do the next two titles. So come back to our first title group. I'll just close the banner group for now, close the background group, close that group, come back to that first titles group, rename it as the main titles, and turn it on. And then open it up, select the title element, bring the playhead to 1 second and 18 frames. Change the X position to about 740. Alright, and then just adjust the X position so that the titles sit behind the bookend. And set a keyframe there. So I'm at about 754. The playhead's at 1.18 frames, 1 second and 18 frames. I've set a keyframe for the X position with the title past the bookend. Then bring the playhead to 4 seconds and set the X position to 0. So your S should be sitting just past the bookend like this. Alright, now we want to play with this curve, so I'm going to drag to selected and break the tangents. I'll drag this handle down this way, not too much. And this handle here we have to be really careful with, so hold the shift key as you drag it flat. And I'm going to pull it back to there. One more time. Okay, so they'll rush in and then ease for most of the run until they stop. Okay, a little bit faster. Okay, that will do, even a little bit faster actually. We want them to be just arriving at the 4 second mark. Okay, good. And you want to check here that there's no bounce back. So your titles come in and stop, they don't swing back even by a fraction. And that can happen with this kind of curve if this handle here isn't completely flat. If it's dipping down this way a bit, you'll get a small bounce back, and that will make the animation out seem a bit silly. Okay, but we're good to go. We might come back and play with this curve again in the next few steps. So now our main visible titles are animated in. Now we want to mask them, so we're going to do that by grabbing this banner from our banner group. Grab it, duplicate it, drag the copy into the main titles group, select that image mask, delete that. We're going to rename this as the main titles mask. Come into the inspector and reset these offsets. Alright, and bring the playhead to the 1 second and 18 frames point. And then we want to grab the X position and drag it right back. So you want this X position sitting right here against the bookend. Okay, and then grab the main titles, right click, add image mask, and add our main titles mask as the source, and then set the blend mode to subtract. Okay, we've got one more set of titles to go. So we want to duplicate this main titles group again, Command D, and we'll do a few things. Let's rename it as the big titles. Inside the group, this copy of the main titles mask, we want to keep that. We'll use it again soon. Just going to rename the titles themselves as main titles big so I can tell them apart. This image mask, delete it. Then come into the properties, make sure that the titles are selected after you deleted the image mask. Come into the properties and reset the X position value. And then come into the text, come into appearance, change the color from white to red. I'm using this red here that I sampled from the source graphic. And here are the RGB settings if you want to use the same color. Right, then come into the format and increase the font size to 102. Then bring your playhead to 1 second and 12 frames. And first thing is to hit I on your keyboard to trim these big titles to that point, and then come into properties, move the X position back until the Y sits right here at this part of the flying banner, this part right here, that's wherever the first point offset is. So we want the Y sitting right here at 1 second and 12 frames. And come into the properties, make sure it's selected in the group, come into properties and set a keyframe for whatever that X position is, because for me and for you it might be a little bit different, but wherever you are, just make sure that your Y is sitting right there. Okay, and then bring the playhead to 4 seconds. You can set the X position at 0 to shift it to the middle, and then drag it forward more so that the S lines up with the S of the main titles, and then drag the Y position down a little bit so we're more in line like this. Okay, let's play with this curve. So I'm going to drag to selected and break the tangents. I'll pull this handle down just for a start, but pull this one flat. I won't worry too much about this now because we're going to come back later after the masking and play with this curve to get it to where we want it. Alright, so the step we want to do now is the first mask. So bring the playhead to 1 second and 12 frames. Come down into the banner group, grab a copy of that banner. Command D to duplicate it, drag the copy up into the big titles group. We're going to rename it as the Big Titles Mask 1. Get rid of that image mask and come into the inspector with that Big Titles Mask 1 selected. First point offset we want to leave it as is, but it's this last point offset that we want to reset. So we will be masking off just this part of the big titles. Select your big titles, add an image mask, drag in big mask 1 as the source, and then set the blend mode to subtract. So ignore this part, just have a look here. You can see that the first point offset is revealing in this part of the big titles. Okay, so now we will mask out this side. So grab that main titles mask copy, rename it as the Big Titles Mask 2. We can turn it on and bring the playhead to 2 seconds. Then come into properties and shift the X position back so that it's sitting right here with the banner at its final place. Okay, select the big titles, add another image mask and drag in the Big Titles Mask 2 as the source and set that blend mode to subtract. So now we want to mask out everything on this side of the bookend. So grab that Big Titles Mask 2 shape, duplicate it, going to rename this as the Big Titles Group Mask. We can turn it on and let's drag it this way and drag this end out further this way. And with the playhead at 2 seconds, yep, drag it in so that it sits flush with the bookend on this side. See, like that, we don't want any of the big titles to be showing over the bookend, so make sure that it's flush, or is flush the right word, straight up against it there. Okay, and then select the big titles group, right click, add image mask, use the big titles group mask as the source, and then set the blend mode to subtract. I'll just tap through frame by frame, and yes, we have got the effect that we wanted. Right, so I mentioned before we'll come back and play with the curve. So we want to speed this up a bit. Let's come in and grab the big titles. I'm going to pull this handle down. To kind of complete the effect, we want, alright, if you can bring the playhead to here when the S is coming out, and adjust the curve so that the S is feeding out so that it might match the main title S, then if we pull it back, the E's should be about lined up as well. So we go E, E, S, S. Everything after that will get out of alignment, but those last two letters kind of sell the effect of what's happening there. Okay, so we're all done with the titles. Now it's time to add those flourishes. So come and grab that group that we made before, flourishes, and we can turn that on now. I'm just going to, with that group selected, I'm going to command right bracket to move it to the top of the group. Let's open it up. I'm going to move my playhead to 2 seconds. Actually, just bring the playhead to about 1 second so the banner's in flight. Okay, select that one labeled flourish top, come into properties and drag the Y position to move it up. Come into the shape section, into style, and drop the width down to say 7. Come into properties and bring the Y position down so it's riding right on top of the banner there. Now bring the playhead to 10 frames, and on your keyboard use the shift left bracket combination to shift the in point forward. So now this flourish will kick in on the 10th frame. And we want the flourish to finish its run sitting right on top of the bookends. So in the inspector, shift the X position back, come to 2 seconds and 10 frames, which is when its run will finish, and line them up. And we want the flourish to disappear completely. So come into the shape and see where it's set here at 99, change that to 100%. So now it will animate itself off completely. And I think I just want to move it back just a touch. Just trying to keep as close as possible to the After Effects source graphic. That's more like it. Right, one more step to do. For the flourishes, select that top flourish, duplicate it. I'll command left bracket to drop it to the bottom of the group, and I'll call it flourish bottom. I'll bring the playhead to 15 frames. And I'll use the shift left bracket hotkey to shift this endpoint forward. and come into properties, grab the Y position and shift it so it's sitting right under the main flying banner there, and come forward to 2 seconds and 15 frames, so that's when it's ending its run. And right, we want to bring it back so that it animates out, erases itself out right under the bookend. There we go. Before we animate everything out, there's one last thing we have to do. We're going to animate this, the banner in its final state to move back into a line with the bookend. So let's grab the banner and bring your playhead to 2 seconds and 15 frames. Come into the inspector and set a keyframe on the X position. Then come to 3 seconds and 20 frames and just drag that X position back until it lines up with the bookend. Like that. And come into the keyframe editor, just break the tangents. Okay, we don't want a very dramatic curve here. Just grab this handle and pull it a bit this way so we get a slow first movement, and grab this handle and pull it in this way. Okay, I think that will do us just fine. Whatever you do, you don't want it coming in too fast because you don't want it closing up before the S has managed to make its way out. Honestly, this last step was the most difficult part to get close to the source graphics look and feel. Okay then, so we're ready to animate out. Bring the playhead to 4 seconds. And we can close up every group. Add a new group. I'll call this group Animate In. And I'm going to select every group except for the background and drag them into the new group. And I will select that new group, and I'm using the O key on my keyboard to trim everything within these groups and within the big group to 4 seconds in the timeline. Then I'm going to right click and select Make Clone Layer, and my playhead's at 4 seconds. I'm going to come into the properties, make sure Clone Layer is selected, come into properties. If you don't see the timing options here, and just click around here where it says show to drop them down and choose this reverse. If you are not getting this timing option, then maybe you are in a motion titles template project. You want to be in a motion project, which I probably should have said at the start. Alright, so our playhead's at 4 seconds, have that clone layer selected and hold the shift and left bracket key at the same time to bring the clone's endpoint to 4 seconds. And we are done. So there we go, that's our 13th After Effects reproduction done. Please do go and check out the source graphic, and if you want to spend any time really tweaking it to get it looking closer to the original, it's always a good thing to do. I hope this was useful for you for your future motion projects and Final Cut projects. Thanks for watching.